Welcome to a special edition of LawNext. I am here in Austin, Texas at the inaugural Kaleidoscope conference of the company 8am, which some of you may still remember as AffiniPay, which recently, just all of 2 weeks ago, rebranded as 8am. And I'm here with Leslie Witt, Chief Product Officer. Leslie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Wonderful to be here with you today.
Great to see you and great to meet you. Leslie, among other things, delivered the keynote this morning and made some announcements, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But before we get to any of that, I actually kind of wanted to just jump into a little bit about your background, because you actually just came to this company in May. We are sitting here now on September 2nd, is it, that we are here? September 3rd.
Yeah.
So it's been barely 5 months that you've been here. So tell us a little about who you are, where you come from, what experience you bring to this company.
Thanks. This was a little bit of a return to my origin story, to be honest with you. So I spent a really formative part of my career focused on small businesses. First, when I established a practice, innovation consultancy, IDEO, that was really focused on how do you develop money services that actually land people and businesses in better places. I went from consulting into my first corporate executive role at Intuit, focused on design and research and kind of new product development across the QuickBooks platform. And then COVID happened. And like many people, I sort of woke up to this moment of staring at myself in the mirror and at the reality of the mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. And so I took a foray away from my commitment to small business success into mental health, which I would say those things are not completely unlinked either, and had a really kind of glorious time over the last 5 years focused on bringing mental health services to everyone, making them more accessible and kind of ubiquitous through Headspace. Mm-hmm. But I kept that passion for fintech and for small business success alive by joining the board at FreshBooks, which is an invoice and accounting platform. And as I was thinking about my next chapter and what really drew me, I was very attracted kind of coming back into this space, but expanding into zones I haven't been in before, which is specifically legal tech. And so as AffiniPay was, like kind of saying, hey, we're ready for our next chapter, both as a brand and as a platform, and we really want to harness the power of technology to improve customer experiences. It was sort of, it was a perfect union.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was thinking about speaking to you and about the fact that you hadn't previously worked in legal, and I wanted to ask you about that, just as you just alluded to. But then I thought, well, she worked in mental health, so maybe that does qualify you to work in legal tech. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I mean, what does that kind of experience, what do you think you bring to working with professional services and to the legal market in general, more specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of very direct analogs from my time focused on small businesses and just looking at the reality, which is they operate a lot more like consumers than like enterprises. And with that comes, and I would say, to be honest, at the end of any enterprise software sits a human as well. But being able to understand how do you bring a level of confidence, of efficiency, of insight to an area that can be quite complex and that isn't necessarily in the kind of dotted square of where they're focused on being experts. And so I think that for professionals, and I'll pick lawyers here, they've been trained to be excellent lawyers. They haven't necessarily been trained to be excellent business people. And so figuring out how to help them thrive at what they do best by making operations more efficient and easier, and by making financial management more effective and easier is where I think I can bring a lot of power. And then that intersection that comes with what I learned more deeply by kind of being in the space of mental health is really about healthy habit formation, taking some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt and shame that, quite honestly, canvases definitely into the financial space and into a firm management space, and making it easier and more compelling to engage.
Yeah. Do you think that not having worked in the legal sector in the past is an advantage or a disadvantage?
I'm a quick learner.
Okay.
So, I would say having spent 10 years as a consultant, I'm industry curious. And so while I'm not deeply steeped in legal tech, I have a absorptive personality, and I have a lot of experts on my team. So, I have folks who, the founder of CasePeer is on my team. Nikki Black, who's one of our industry experts, is somebody that I get to consult with all the time, get to spend a lot of time with customers. And so I do think that mix in general, whether it's from the person that's coming in as the chief product officer, you name it role, that mix of having both deep expertise and groundedness and new perspective is really essential to help drive relevant innovation.
Mm-hmm. So Leslie, when you were considering moving into this job, or when you decided to move into this job and you had conversations with Drew, the CEO, or with other executives here, what were their marching orders in a sense to you? What did they want you to do? What were they bringing you in to accomplish here?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's really that moment I was speaking to this morning, which is about a new promise and paying it off in the actual customer experiences and platform. They're also looking at the reality, which is right now, the practice of law, the practice of accounting, quite honestly, the practice of almost anything in any industry is being substantially transformed, or the promise of transformation, through AI. And so bringing in someone who has experience developing generative AI tools in tandem with experience understanding the vicissitudes of small business finance and operations, like to bring that combo together in order to help customers lean in and trust the evolution of our services was a real essential.
Yeah. What was your sense? I mean, 8 a.m., I still want to call it AffiniPay because I've known it for a long time, and that the company as a whole has really been through a lot of changes over the last few years,
Absolutely.
not just the rebranding now, but the acquisition of MyCase and the companies that went along with it, CasePeer and others, and the integration of all of that. So, where is this company in that evolution of bringing that all together into a cohesive whole, and what are the sort of the challenges that remain in continuing to execute on that?
They're quite far along. And, that was also when I thought about, is this the right time for me to join this company? A lot of it was poised on the work that has gone into, just to throw some wonkier terms, into the replatforming of our products, so that the kind of industrial logic of bringing these things together could actually manifest in the customer experience. And so I shared this morning the kind of promise to pay off of LawPay, MyCase, and SmartSpend all being developed on the same chassis. That is something that has been done. I can put it in that kind of past tense, but the migration of all of our LawPay customers is a main thrust and focus of the next several months. And so we are looking to be close to fully migrated onto this singular platform by the time that we head into 2026. And what that really allows us to do is to ensure that the innovations that we're bringing to life are available to the vast majority of our customers, that when we're developing, say, an improvement around billing and invoicing, that it actually cascades as value across all of our platform. And so there's an efficiency to it, and then there's a seamlessness to the customer. And, I'd say that's a big part of why I was okay, the why now is I viscerally know from past experience that's a multi-year journey, and it has been for what was AffiniPay and is now 8 a.m. And it's what made this the right time to actually make that brand transformation, because the platform transformation underpins it as the proof.
Yeah. I want to get back to the platform transformation, but I want to also back up a little bit more to the brand transformation that you've been talking about. I mean, I wonder if you could elaborate. I mean, I'm sure this was well underway at the point that you joined. I know I interviewed Drew for this podcast probably 2 years ago when she talked about the fact that they were going to be, at some point wanting to do this. So I know it's been a long process, what's been your experience with that process? Why do you think it's important to have gone through this transformation? What does this mean really ultimately for the customers and end users of these products? What's the significance for them?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that while our product brands, MyCase, LawPay, DocketWise, CasePeer, CPA Charge, are well-known and well-respected, our former company brand, AffiniPay, was mostly not known.
Right. That's
right. And so it had that dimension of being a kind of invisible presence that quite honestly spoke to an origin story that the company had evolved beyond. Yeah. It has pay in its title. Yeah. It's very hard to say like, oh, but we're more than payments when your name says pay. Yeah. And so there was a mismatch between who we are, current state, and the previous name, and then certainly around that and who we are aspiring to become, which is to ensure that as a brand that is a place where, you know, we're committed to helping professionals thrive, that that's legal and more, that it's practice management, financial management, it's payments, it's the, you know, kind of whole kit and caboodle, and that it's aspirationally about the outcome that we're driving, not just the stuff. And so I think that's what got everyone excited, me very much included, about rolling into owning this new name and promise.
Yeah, no, it's very true that, as you say, legal professionals that I would speak to would have no idea what AffiniPay is. They would know LawPay. They would know, as you say, they know the brands that are under that umbrella, but they didn't understand. They never heard the name AffiniPay, really, for the most part. So that makes a lot of sense. What about the actual branding itself? You know, what have you heard in terms of what's the reception been to all of that, and you know, what are people saying about it? So
my origin story is in design. I actually was originally an architect of the build buildings kind, so I care a lot about how things look. And I would say that in any brand rollout, most of the people who talk are gonna like give a little snark. But when it's snark plus positivity, that's a core win. And what we've heard are a good number of, I like the name. Hey, it's like refreshing to see some like energetic colors. And then overall, like the way that that's come to life within our product experiences has met with generally positive reception. So, you know, people are wary of change, and I'd say that in a good way, it's raised customer expectations on us addressing some of the little negs that are about things that just aren't living up to their expectations, and we want that. Like part of rolling out a more compelling brand is to say, we're raising the bar on consumer expectations, and that's a bar that we can meet and will continue to promise to raise our game.
Yeah. You know, I forgot to. Actually, you reminded me that I saw that you had you got your master's degree in architecture. You worked in architecture for a while. How did you get from that to this?
How much time do we have? No,
not much.
No, you know, I would say
the nutshell version.
Yeah, the nutshell version is basically I realized I loved the academic side of architecture. I didn't love being a practitioner. And I had one of those lucky moments where this company, IDEO, in the early 2000s, had really come onto the scene big time, establishing like the ideas around design thinking, and you know, having companies of all types lean in to figure out like, what's my next iPhone? And they needed people who knew how to 3D model. And I came in as a 3D modeler, and by 2 years later, I'd started a practice focused on financial service innovation. I won't tell you how. It was a place where serendipity and curiosity were allowed to lead you, and I took that for all it was worth. And that's sort of how I'm here today.
And here you are.
Yeah.
I thought was it, here you are delivering the keynote at the company's first conference 4 months after joining the company. I mean, was that at all daunting to you, or how did you feel about that?
Actually, I would say like when Drew and I were chatting about starting, she's like, okay, you're starting in May. Here's the date I want you to hold. You will be on stage as the keynote at this. And it was really exciting to get to be here. It's been a very fun ride so far, and I'd say like we're just getting started.
All right. Well, you had 4 months of stress about
That's
this,
right.
and now you
That's
can move
right.
on to your day job. Do you, as you step in, I mean, you made a lot of announcements this morning about products I'd like to talk a little bit more about, but just more generally, more broadly, do you have kind of a product design philosophy, or a philosophy that you approach product development and design from, or what's your kind of perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's grounded in deep customer observation and empathy, I would say, like at the core. Really saying like there's always a unique opportunity, and we're certainly in one of those transformational moments, to take the capabilities that technology brings to the table in order to solve problems anew. it's also very easy to get distracted by new technology and to get kind of enamored with solutions in search of a problem. And so I'd say like what I take from, honestly, my days as an architect and then anchored in a process methodology from my time at IDEO is you have to understand what they're seeking to do and foundationally connect the dots in a way that is simple and accessible. And that ends up being a golden pathway.
Yeah. How do you do that in terms of understanding how lawyers and small firms are using technology or aren't using technology? I mean, how do you kind of communicate with your customers or understand what it is your customers want or need?
I mean, really across a canvas, like there's observation and conversation, and I do separate those two because a lot of times you want to see past what a person says they do, and you're like, intriguing. I'm observing something a little bit different, and try and understand what sits between those things. You look for workarounds. How are they making things work for what they do versus like there's a pathway where it could be simpler and easier. What are some of those psychological barriers? You know, I'd say like trust is certainly one when it comes to uptake of AI tooling. Sometimes it's business model, right? Like if you're a lawyer and you're deeply married to hourly billing and you have this tool that sits here promising mass efficiency, well, there's like some innate tension between those things. So how might you help someone lean into business model evolution? So observation and conversation that meets rapid experimentation, right? Like you are always looking to oscillate between a problem identified or an opportunity identified and the actual solution that you bring to life. The best way to do that is to try on a variety of ones for size. And so we use, a canvas between kind of uncoded, and now that's becoming like a little blurrier with some of the Gen AI tools, but the fastest way to put in front of someone, like, what about this? What about this? And to be able to garner those impacts and then grow that into something that's coded in beta but continues to live and evolve.
Yeah. I was thinking, just in the time I have been here, we're on the first day of this conference, at the morning of the first day of this conference, but I had a conversation this morning. I've had several conversations with lawyers who are customers, who are pretty sophisticated users of technology and your technology specifically. But I had a conversation with a woman this morning who's at a firm. They were completely paper-based until a year ago, and they moved on to MyCase like a year ago, and they're just making this transition, and they're just figuring it out. So that must have to kind of play into how you design these products. There are people who are just figuring it out, and there are people who are advanced. And how do you kind of be everything to everybody?
Well, you can't. I think like there is a dimension of like, I'm not going to be everything to everyone. However, like one of the pithier sayings I'm sure you've heard is like the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. Right. And that's always the case, both like that there's extreme examples, but in almost everyone's life, there's some version of that where there's an extreme lean in, and then there's a legacy of norms. And, I'd say like we feel that every day in our payments business. Lawyers still really like checks, right? And so the check may be dead in various parts of the world. The check is not dead when it comes to legal tech. Right. And that's even for firms who have deeply embraced digital payments. And so you're always in a kind of both and moment, and you want to make sure that the things that you're developing help nudge folks into more efficient and effective ways to operate, that you're always making sure they actually do that, and that you're creating room for diversity.
To go back to the platform integration that you talked about, you said that you're now bringing together onto a single technology platform, LawPay, MyCase, SmartSpend.
You got it.
Does this also go to DocketWise, or is this
not yet? Not yet, but we have actually created an extraction of some of the smart forms and workflows from DocketWise and have that available in MyCase as what we're calling our immigration add-on.
But so describe more what this means. What does this mean for customers? What are they going to see? What will be different? What will be the same? Yeah,
so I'd say like if you're a current LawPay customer on what we are internally referring to as LawPay Classic, as we transition you into the new LawPay, it has everything that you've always had. Like, so there's feature parity plus. And two of the areas that we felt were most critical to bring to life and not sequester into a practice management platform were time tracking and invoicing. And so those are probably the two biggest changes in terms of bringing a feature completeness. The other thing is that at a moment in time, for those who choose to expand into practice management, all of the data that they have collected immediately flows in and through. And so that transition, whether it's from how you log on to wanting to understand where your client information is, there's no data migration necessary. It's just an unlock into a broader set of tools. And what will happen, it's not yet, but you mentioned SmartSpend. Right now, SmartSpend is available only to our MyCase customers. But because we now have the same platform logic across cases and clients, that's something that we are expanding over the coming months to our LawPay base. And so these additional financial services, I mentioned 8am Capital, which will come out in 2026, those will be available to our customers, whether they are active practice management users or not.
All right. So if I am a MyCase customer currently, does this platform integration mean anything to me?
Yeah, it does. We have finally delivered all of the LawPay. No, is it not? Well, on this knock on this fake wood, we have fully embedded all of the robustness of LawPay payments into MyCase. And so it used to be that if you used both, you actually occasionally had to log on to LawPay in order to actually kind of complete feature completeness. And so we have fully embedded LawPay payments in the MyCase platform now.
A couple of other things you announced today. Well, actually, you just mentioned 8am Capital. Could you explain what that is or what you announced there?
Yeah, so we have been really focused on what I would say is like the critical problem of all small businesses, which is having the cash to operate. And I think anyone who's ever run a business and not had somebody else paying their paycheck has had the experience that sometimes in your moment of biggest glory, you have your biggest cash flow crisis, right? And then there's like the opportunities that you'd like to lean into. Oh, I see an opportunity here. I need to spend more on marketing, or I actually want to hire this person in order to take this bigger job, but I'm not going to get paid for it for X amount of time. And so the SmartSpend that I already mentioned and is live is one type of cash flow tool, and it's really focused on expense reimbursement and expense management. 8am Capital.
That's basically a credit card for your employees.
It's a credit card with
manage all your spending,
expense management layer. Yeah. The 8am Capital is what's kind of an MCA-like loan, so it's a merchant capital advance based on underwriting of your transactional flow. And what that allows is that for businesses, a lot of times a business has proof that they have a robust, repeatable engine and that they are credit worthy that isn't manifest in their credit score, especially their personal credit score. Some of them barely have a business credit score, and isn't necessarily showing up in what like a traditional bank would like to see, like 2 years of robust tax filings. And so what we're able to do is extend short-term loans at good prices for a far broader cohort of folks. And it's easy application, easy pay, and then the payback is also integrated and automated.
Yep. I've been talking to you almost a half an hour without mentioning AI, which is almost a record for an interview.
How is that possible?
I know, how is that possible? But you made some announcements along that front this morning. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in terms of developing and integrating generative AI into your products.
Yeah, I'd say our hallmark experience is 8am IQ. And right now it is focused on a set of features that we call Chat with Cases. And what that allows you to do is now fully include any documents, not yet OCR documents, so I should say any text-based documents right now, but by end of year, all documents, in a interactive, dialogue-based search, synthesis, and summarize type of experience. And so that lets you, at the level of singular documents or in aggregate, understand case history, pull out any information that's nested within, and also have like that kind of super duper employee that remembers everything, works 24/7, is always chipper and happy, and it turns out also speaks basically any language on the planet. And so that fluency is something that we've seen. We've had some beta customers in it. We're expanding that beta. That was what I announced today, and looking to pretty rapidly accelerate towards general availability.
So will 8am IQ be able to query across all of the documents within, ultimately, when you said, I think by the end of the year, all of the documents within the platform, including, you're saying, OCR images, which is something else you talked about, but financial documents, case documents, all of that? Or
by the end of the year, that's our goal. I would say right now, what we are able to do is within any given case, all of the documents in the case. And so it really, what we saw as we went to, that process that I was talking about of observation and discussion is obviously there's a lot of concerns about accuracy and privacy. And so the way that we can fulfill expectations is to say, hey, you're operating within this existing structure. That's how your firm tends to operate, which is a case-based archetype. We've started to link some client-based archetypes because often there's multiple cases per client, but it really kind of contains its document-based search, which will include OCR by the end of the year. So that 30% of image-based documents included to be able to extract information. We are also simultaneously working on ensuring that the financial side of the case, right? And this would be more broadly kind of finances at a multi-case firm level are things that we can, if you are the right role and have the right permissions within the platform, unleash the power of generative AI on. And so some of the most common use cases are, who owes me money? All right, send a reminder and take that dimension of communication, oversight, predictive action into the financial documents portion of the platform.
I mean, you talked about, one of the other things you talked about was that you're going to be enhancing the ability to create custom reports within MyCase. How is custom reporting different from sort of financial IQ or financial AI? I mean, I assume you could also look into a report and say, who owes me money, and figure that out in your reporting. So how are the workflows or how are the use cases different?
They blend. And so part of us redoing our reporting engine, one was to make it just faster and more effective. The second was to make it easier to customize reports to how a firm likes to see its own operations. But it was also to set the stage and to kind of create the right data structures so that insight that you might be going for that right now requires a report to be run and some level of knowledge of how to take that report and extract what you need to know can become as simple as just saying, who owes me money? Who owes me money that's more than 30 days overdue? Which of my employees is the most productive? Right? And so, the older way of doing that is to create reports that kind of provide that in a structured capacity. We definitely see there's blurry lines and that the scales will tip over time to simply being able to ask the question that right now require a report to answer.
A much more natural process, really, and more immediate. What about on the sort of the case or matter level, not the financial level, but can you perhaps give me an example of how a beta user might use this now to ask a question about a matter that they're involved in?
Yeah, I mean, I can share with you. We have a very active beta user who I think on average is using it around 60 times per day. And in that case, this individual is really like just using it as a massively advanced search mechanic. Tell me, I think I actually used an example while I was up on stage, which is a lot of give me the individual happens to be in family law. Tell me who all the family members are. What are their ages? And just being able to run those types of queries. It's great at that. I don't think that's necessarily where it's showcasing its utmost abilities. Where I get very excited is around some of the case history, help me understand what's happened, summarizing and synthesizing some of the key points and discussions that have been manifest in the documents that have been collected around the case. And so, again, that if your brain could hold all of that information, this is what each person wants to know, but right now it takes a lot of manual effort in order to extract that.
You also mentioned this morning a new integration with Net Documents for document management system. Probably self-explanatory. I don't know if we need to talk a lot about that. And just I'm watching the clock, and I know we have only a few more minutes to talk. But I was kind of curious before we do wrap up to hear a little bit more about where are we going from here. I talked this morning about this is the first Kaleidoscope. There's going to be another one next year, I guess. Already talking about that. how will this product how will these group of products, how will 8am have evolved from now to a year from now?
Yeah, I'd say like really three ways. One is, I kind of outlined the three legs of the stool that make up our promise and what I would say we see as our differentiation in the space, which is that we come from a deep kind of financial management, fintech foundation and extend into practice management. And that three legs of the stool that we think are very powerful when knit together well of payments, financial management, and practice management is something that we will continue to kind of weave together with greater and greater efficiency and effectiveness. AI will be some of that glue that allows those things to work that much more kind of effectively together in a way that's simple and insightful and powerful. So that's kind of the second layer. And then the third is really, we are a platform that's focused on professionals, not just legal. And so I'd say what you should expect to see from us is a concerted expansion into other industries. We have a little bit of that with the way that we have CPA charge today, but we see a lot of synchrony with the accounting and bookkeeping space, and also some blur that happens across. You think about, say, estate law or immigration, and really figuring out what this sensible path is to take vertical specialization, but to take it in such a way that we can bring it to life for multiple verticals at once.
There's been a lot of conversation, not here yet, although I'm sure there will be before the day's over, about what the impact of AI ultimately will be on law practice in the legal profession, with some predicting it's going to fundamentally change the way lawyers practice law, others saying it's going to be, another step forward in technology, but not necessarily a fundamental change. I know you're still new to the company and somewhat new to the legal field, but do you have thoughts on really what that impact is going to be as we go forward?
I do. And maybe the way to start, I tend towards the utopic. So I own that. So I don't think there's mass destruction coming. I don't think this is the end of fill in the blank. And I think we've actually already seen that in some of the industries that were even more ripe for disruption than legal, which is radiology, accounting. And there are changes. There are things that the AI, I'll pick on radiology here for a second, they can run the kind of most simple diagnostics even better. But what we're seeing is that when you put the superpower, which is AI, in the hands of the experts, which are radiologists, they are making greater things happen together. And that's actually my prediction for what we're going to see in the legal industry is, yes, it's going to change. It's going to change the business model. I'm almost certain of it. I think we'll see a mass acceleration away from hourly to fixed fee. I think it's going to allow small firms to operate that much more effectively. But it's also going to mean that everyone has to and is enabled to raise their game. And so I'm really excited to see what equipping lawyers with these superpowers allows the superpowered law to bring to life.
I've been asking you lots of questions. Anything else that you wanted to say or point out before we wrap up?
Well, I was going to say, as someone new to the legal tech industry, any piece of advice for me?
Build on that mental health background you have, and make sure you use that. No, I have no advice whatsoever. It sounds like you don't need any. You're doing just fine. But.
Well, thank you for spending time with
us.
Thank
you very much. I really appreciate your taking
Same.
time out of this busy conference to sit down and speak with me.
Loved
Good
it.
to talk to you.